Good evening. My name is John H., and I'm an alcoholic. In this Code Blue Big Book Action Seminar, we're going to go through the recovery section of the Big Book line by line. We are going to take the action that our founders and the first 100 people who recovered say that we must do to overcome this seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. Now, I don't claim to be any kind of a big book and 12-step guru or expert, not by any means. I am no kind of deep spiritual advisor. I'm just a simple drunk who was almost dead from the disease when a couple of recovered alcoholics reached out their hand to me and said, "We have a different way." Now, this is based on the Canadian method pioneered by the Golden Slippers, but I also borrow heavily from the Joe and Charlie Big Book Weekend tapes, from Chuck C., from Clancy, and from all of the giants upon whose shoulders we are riding. Now, I would love it if you could grab a couple of friends and listen to these sessions together, because working the steps with other people is always more powerful than trying to go through them alone. So you're going to need a large print big book, a highlighter, and a pen, and some willingness. And as you guys will see, we open every session with a set-aside prayer to more open our mind to be more receptive to this information. Thank you so much for listening. Good evening, I'm John. I'm an alcoholic. Okay. During the 1950s, a man by the name of Max C., now deceased, started a group in Winnipeg, Manitoba called the Golden Slippers. The group was a back to the basics of the big book kind of group, especially for those people who could not stay sober for any length of time. The group took a bunch of chronic slippers and walked them through the steps, taking the action exactly as laid out by the first 100 men and women who wrote the basic textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not your typical thanks for sharing kind of AA meeting, nor is it like any seminar. Participants are asked to do all 12 steps as laid out in our basic textbook. One or more of the people who have done this work before will be guides to lead you through the instructions in our basic textbook using a dictionary published at about the same time as the book Alcoholics Anonymous to help us better understand the directions as they were written by the first 100 men and women. We ask every participant to commit to the entire process. Though we read and study the AA Big Book, this group is not limited to members of AA. We who have participated in these groups before have come to understand that these sessions make us much better sponsors. We can now lead people through the steps exactly as given to us by those who have gone before, unfettered and unchanged. In addition to being a boot camp for sponsors, we also feel this is especially valuable to those who have been through some sort of treatment or rehab and have been, in effect, left off at step 3 or 5. Recovery requires that we do all 12 steps. We recover in AA by taking the steps, and if we don't take the action as described in our basic book, we might not recover. These study and action sessions will guide you through the steps precisely as the first 100 men and women laid them down. These are back to the basic sessions, accepting the simple kit of spiritual tools that's been laid at our feet. Let's open with a set-aside prayer. God, please let me set aside everything I think I know about sobriety, life, and you, so that I may be open to a new experience. Amen. Peace. All right, welcome, guys. So this, if we do, the fourth step really is where I think where the work really starts. What use is it to be sober if we are constantly full of resentment and fear? I mean, if you take a day off from work and you're thinking about how those people at work are screwing you over, and you're afraid that somebody's stealing your business, I mean, you're just not going to feel very well. And what I always did when I wasn't feeling well is I would drink, to get rid of that horrible feeling. I guess I want to start out by making sure everybody understands the instructions on the resentments. So, again, they're quite simple. Let me grab my sheet here. Down here. There we are. And if anybody needs more sheets, I like to make copies so you got plenty of these. When we're doing our resentments, again, what I want, my sponsor, what he had me do was carry a little notebook with me, because whenever I thought of somebody that I had resentment against, he wanted me to have that notebook. I'd whip it out and I'd write that name down, right? But the way that we want to do this is we want to do column 1 first. So we're going to think of all these people that we have resentments at, right? People that we think about now and again and how they screwed us over or they did something to it. And this can also be institutions, and this can also be, it can be thoughts, you know, like, or in order to be a successful man, I've got to have a big house and a wife, you know, things of that nature, principles, guiding principles. So whatever these are, we want to get them down here. Then we want to do the cause, right? We want to do column 2. Now remember last week when I did Eric's, right? I mean, he's resentful at his wife. Well, because she cheated, right? Me, my boss, because my boss, you know, put me down in front of other people. And then I ran a column about my boss where I thought that the bonus checks he was getting should have been my bonus checks, right? So I just did a couple of these. I'm going to run another one about the IRS, right? I used to think, you know, because I needed all my money for drugs and alcohol, and I got so angry when I would get my check and it would be close to, I'd only get like 60% or less, maybe 55% of my check, right? So I looked at it as the IRS. I had a big resentment against them because they're stealing my money, right? And of course, the way I looked at it, I'm out there using, I'm like, they're taking advantage of single white men. Right there I am. Well, no, they're taxing everybody the same based on all of the same thing. But there I am being prejudiced both against females and minorities by saying they're taxing me as a single white man more. So the IRS was on. I was very angry at them because they were stealing my money, right? This sheet that we have, oops. This is a really important sheet right here. These are the definitions, because as we work our way across, and I erased some of it, but as we work our way across, we want to see how these resentments are affecting which part of our self. And remember, our self is made up of our basic instincts. We have the social instinct, right? What you guys think of me, what I think of myself, or what I think you think of me, right? My standing in the community. They have my security instinct, what I need to feel safe and secure, both now and in the future. And then, of course, they have my sex instinct, you know, which are acceptable and hidden sex relations, and also my sex relations for the future. The ambitions are for the future. So when I looked at the IRS, I think I'm gonna shoot right over to, because many of the names on here are listed both for resentments. We're going to see the same names and institutions come up that we're also afraid of, right? So now the IRS was stealing my money, and I'm madder than hell at them guys, right? But rather than do the column on my resentment, I'm going to go down and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm a fear. Who am I afraid of? I'm afraid of the IRS. Why am I afraid of the IRS? Well, because I was so angry and thought they were stealing my money, I claimed 10 deductions, right, over the years. So basically, all of a sudden, I'm getting calls from the IRS. Well, of course, I needed the money for drugs and alcohol. So now they're calling me, and they are threatening me. The IRS is threatening me. And I'm afraid that the IRS is going to put me in jail. So that was a big fear. Big fear. But it was also a huge resentment, right? And we're going to see that my boss, huge resentment, but also huge fear. Eric's wife, remember Eric's wife who cheated on him and how badly that affected and how angry he was. He was also afraid of his wife that she was going to leave him. So many of these names, and not for me, just about all of them, were on my resentment list. They were on my fear list. And what did I do? I lashed out and I hurt them. They were on my hurts and harms list. So the IRS, right, they want to put me in jail. So they're calling me at work, they're calling me at home, right? You owe us for this year, that year, this year, and we're going to start garnishing your wages, and we're going to send somebody over there to your place of business. They're going to sit down. So I'm terrified. So let's look at how this fear affects my social instincts. So again, we got to keep reading these definitions so we understand more about the basic instincts of life. Social instinct, your natural tendencies or feelings from birth having to do with people as a group with interests in common. Okay, self-esteem, what we think of ourselves, high or low. Well, my self-esteem, I actually, believe it or not, was both positive and negative. because I was thinking, I put the screws to those guys. I put it over them for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. They weren't catching me. So I was a smart guy, right? So positive, but also negative, because they had power over me, and they were going to come to my place of business and possibly do things to me. So that affected my self-esteem positively and negatively. Next, we have personal relationships. Our relations with other human beings and the world around us involves a third party. Do not use the person from column 1. So I'm terrified that the IRS is going to come to my place of business. They're going to sit down, they're going to, in front of everybody, and possibly take me out of there. Now, how is that affecting my personal relationships? I get the call from the IRS and I'm on the phone with 20 minutes and I hang up. How do you think I'm going to be helping my customers out now? How do you think I'm going to be reacting with the other people that I work with? It absolutely affected all of my personal relationships. That fear hanging over my head. Let's go on to security instinct. Material. Your natural tendencies or feelings of safety, freedom from danger or harm. Well, of course it's affecting that. And by the way, I mean, when we're going to get over here, we're going to see that I did all this to myself. Material. Wanting money, property, clothing, housing, vehicles, etc. in order to be secure. Well, yes, my material security is affected, because when the IRS is done with me, they're going to take everything I got. There's going to be nothing left. I'm going to be homeless, broke. Affects that. Emotional. Based on our need for another person or persons, some people tend to dominate, some are overly dependent on others. You know, that one I'm not necessarily going to check that one on this one. Let's go to sex instinct. Your natural tendencies regarding sex. Acceptable sex relations. Our sex lives is accepted by society. God's principles, our own principles. Now, I get home from work, and my girlfriend comes over for dinner. And I got this hanging over my head, and I'm terrified, and I'm sweating. Do you think I'm gonna take her out to dinner and spend any money, or I'm even gonna be good company? I mean, it's absolutely affecting my relationships with loved ones, right? Ambitions. Let's skip over to ambitions. Social ambitions. Your plans to gain acceptance, power, recognition, prestige, etc. My status. Well, that's going to all be on hold, because I'm probably going to be going to jail anyway, right? Yeah, that's all on hold. There's not much I can do. Security ambitions, your plans to gain material wealth. Well, I'm not taking that promotion and moving out of state, because they're going to, what's the use? The IRS is going to get all the money anyway. Sexual ambitions, your plans regarding your sex lives, either acceptable or hidden. Well, you know what, man? I was gonna ask this girl to marry me, but what's the difference? I'm gonna probably end up broke and homeless. I'm just gonna forget the whole damn thing. Hey, don't call me again, right? It affects everything, right? So now, and by the way, I would have gone through in my resentment, the fact that they're stealing all my money, I would have checked all of these up here on the resentment list for the same reason. Right? Because I would matter than hell that they're stealing my money. This is ridiculous. Look at all these people on welfare and they're taking my money, right? So that stuff is going through my head. Now let's go over to the exact nature of my wrongs on this one. Accurate, methodical, the essential characteristic of a thing. Acting, judging, or believing incorrectly. Fault, something done wrongly, an error, mistake. Mistake, to understand or perceive wrongly. Defect, lack of something necessary for completeness. Shortcoming, falling short of what is expected or required. Let's look at selfish. Right, so over here, and let's say that I did run this and my resentment was against them because they were taking my money. I would have checked all the same. So right here, I am nailing the IRS to the cross. I'm the prosecuting attorney here on column 1, column 2, and column 3, because the IRS, they're taking my money and they're affecting all of this. It's all their damn fault, right? But now when we go to page 67 on these, I'm shooting back to resentments now. When we go back to page 67 in the middle of the page, this is the big part, right? I'm the prosecuting attorney here, blaming everybody else for what they're doing to poor old little John. Now I get to column 4. Middle of the page, referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? So now I've got to put out of my mind everything that the IRS is doing to me, right? And going back to the resentment wise, what is the nature? What did I do, man? What's not my part? What is the nature of my wrong? In this one, everybody makes that mistake, and I make it too. When I say, what is my part, I don't say that when I'm right here, because if I say, what is my part, that assumes that these people also have a part. When I get to the fourth column, I do not want to consider these people at all. I only want to consider the exact nature of John's wrongs, right? So let's see where John was selfish. Strictly material, property, money, housing, clothing, vehicles. Well, John is claiming 10 deductions, and number one, because he does need the money for booze and drugs, right? That goes without saying. But number two, he doesn't think that he should have to pay the money like the other people. That's just like when John is driving down the street at 20 miles over the speed limit, and he gets pulled over, and he's madder than hell because John doesn't think that he has to live by the same rules that other people do, right? That's me, man. So yeah, I'm dishonest. You bet I am. Self-seeking and frightened. What I want matters more than what you want. My needs matter more than yours. My feelings or comfort comes first. Well, there are, you pay for the police, you pay for the army, you pay for all these other things, and everybody in society's got to pay their fair share, except for me. Damn it, I don't have to pay. So yes, I'm self-seeking, and I'm frightened that I'm going to get caught. Absolutely. Dishonest, to commit to do, to act out and out lies. Yeah, I claim 10 deductions. That's an out and out lie, an absolute lie. Frightened, hell yeah. Fear of not being accepted, fear of my wants, needs, feelings not being met. People think less of me, absolutely. Inconsiderate, did I fail to consider how they felt, their wants, their needs, their beliefs, how I affected them? Well, as society as a whole on this one, I fail to consider everybody else because I'm putting myself above the law, saying that, you guys have to pay for all these services that society needs, but not me. So man, I got all four of them on that one, right? And again, I ran the fear column, but I would have checked the same exact things for being angry, right? Now again, going back to Eric's wife cheating on him that I did last week, right? He was madder than hell at his wife. Why? Because she cheated. Did it affect his self-esteem? Yeah, he felt like crap. Did it affect his personal relationships? He didn't go out with anybody. He was afraid they were going to find out about it. Did it affect his material security for material? Yeah, he's not going to put any more money because he's going to get divorced anyway. Does it affect his emotional? His emotional, based on our need for another person or person. Some people tend to dominate, some overly. Yes, it affected his emotional instincts. Did it affect his sex instinct? Acceptable? Absolutely, man. He wanted to have sex with her, but he didn't want to have sex with her. He did, he didn't. He hated her, he loved her, he hated her. He was going crazy. Hidden sex relations. As he said, well, that was maybe her. She was the one having all the affairs, not him. And it affected all of his ambitions for the future, both social, because he's not going to, what is society? He's not going to do anything because they're all going to find out what a schmuck he is. He's letting his wife cheat on him, right? So it's affecting this. It's affecting his security ambitions because, again, if he does take that raise and move the family, she's going to get half of the money when she divorces him. And his sexual ambitions for the future, he was telling me at one point he didn't even want to talk to the opposite sex. So it affected all of these things, and his resentment was tremendous. And then again, last week we went through these about how he was selfish. He did take family money and buy things like motorcycles. When they went to counseling, he was very dishonest and didn't, and by omission and just by not talking. He was self-seeking because he was the one that always made decisions on what house they're going to buy, where they go on vacation, these things. He said his expectations on that woman were so tremendous that he shouldn't have been surprised in retrospect when he looked on the fact that she cheated on him. And he was absolutely inconsiderate both in counseling and before any of this happened. So again, when we look at these things here, we put out of the mind what she did to him. Don't even think about that. What is the exact nature of our wrongs? This is so important that we do this on our resentments. We got to see the nature of our wrongs, man. Because if we don't see the nature of our wrongs, we're just going to get madder and madder when we're doing this, and we're gonna continue to be a victim and blame everybody else. So we've got to do the fourth column. And again, I mean, it says referring to our list again. That's why we don't throw it away. Putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? So this is what we're gonna learn about ourselves, the way that we've been showing up. And when we discover these things, we know what we're going to be talking about in our fifth step. You know, we're not going to be given a history to our sponsor. We're going to be talking about our character defects to our sponsor in step 5. Then we're going to know which character defects we got to get ready to have God remove in step 6. We know the defects we ask Him to remove in 7. We've got the list of our names and institutions for step 8. Right? And then we go out and we make our amends for doing this crap here in step 9. So we got to have this in order to go forward in the steps. If we don't get this, we're not doing anything at all. Right? And this, and a lot of times, you know, and all of my resentments, I might be a little bit stranger than most people, but just about every one of the resentments that I have, you know, they talk about justified resentments. And, you know, justified resentment would be something like if you were sexually abused as a child, or maybe your father beat you or something of that nature. And those are going to get us drunk just as fast as the unjustified. But when I really looked at myself, I got the ball rolling on everything. Everybody that I was angry at, everybody I stayed up late at night thinking about how I'm going to get even with that son of a bitch for doing that. When I really looked over here, I saw that I was the one that got the ball rolling because of my character defects. And I needed to know this, right, in order for me to go forward in this program. So this is the thing. And we've got to be praying throughout this whole process, man. We got to be praying so that God can, you know, I love the set-aside prayer so that we can see a little bit clearer what's going on. But it's also very important that we see these basic instincts, right? Because I cannot get angry, I cannot be afraid, and I cannot harm anybody unless somebody is threatening my social standing, my security, or my sexual well-being. If none of these are threatened, then I cannot be angry or full of fear or harm somebody. So it's quite important that's why these definitions are very important that we learn them. Okay, so again, guys, when we do this, the names, what's the cause, and then once we have those, then we go across column 3 one at a time, making our check marks. We do all of the column 3 because we're looking for patterns. And then once we're done with column 3, we do column 4. And we just got to keep going on this thing. We got to, and resentments are the number one offender. Resentments kill more alcoholics than anything. I thought it was my guilt, shame, and remorse that was going to kill me. The things that I had done to my parents and my friends and fellow employees, but the resentments are the number one offenders. They kill more alcoholics. We saw that the 5 synonyms are grave, fatal, die, poison, kill. And again, it talks about being fancied or real. And I discovered that the funny thing is, a lot of my resentments were fancied. They weren't even real. They were all up here. Now, when I discovered this, those guys, poof, they disappeared out of my head. It was like magic. When I did this process, 95% of my resentments disappeared of their own accord. They just were, when I saw how stupid and silly they were, they disappeared. And particularly when I saw this. Now the other 5%, right, work with my sponsor in the ultimate weapon, praying. I got somebody over here and I just can't get past it. I've got to pray for these people. I've got to pray that they, like the woman in the book. Remember the woman in the book who blamed her mother for her marriage failing, blamed her mother for her lack of education, and she blamed her mother for her alcoholism, right on page 551. And, nonsense, man. she was blaming her mother for everything when it was really her. And through prayer, praying for her mother, she got rid of that last resentment because she knew she was going to be drunk if she didn't do that, right? So if you want to keep resentments, by all means, don't pray about them, right? Now the funny thing is, when some of these when they start to disappear, nature abhors a vacuum. So when we get rid of our resentments, God is going to put something else in there, right? He's going to put love, patience, tolerance, compassion, and goodwill to my fellow man. And that happens automatically because nature abhors a vacuum. Now, when those good things come in, that's God's thinking coming into my head. The resentments and the nature of my wrongs was my thinking, right? Right? We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. So again, we start praying for, if we've got people on that list and we're still angry at them, people or institutions or principals, we've got to pray for these people every day. And eventually, when that resentment starts to subside and we actually want them to experience good things in their life, we can cross their name off of our list, right? I got to tell you, man, being a commissioned salesman, oh my God, that's why so many alcoholics are salesmen. I mean, can you imagine you get scooped by somebody, they're stealing your deal, you go home and you're just pissed off. You got a customer you spend a lot of time with and they go buy it from your competitor. I mean, it's crazy. And I see regular people who aren't alcoholics that are eaten up with resentment, but they don't drink and they don't die. We do. That's why we've got to get rid of these, right? And then the other thing that happens when you're a commissioned salesman, right, and things are going on, you treat people badly. You steal their deals, right? Or you see a little old lady that essentially the little old lady is saying, John, I want to take 2 hours of your time and you won't make a penny. Meanwhile, that guy over there just made $1,000. Sometimes you get selfish and you want the money and you treat other people badly, and then all of a sudden you're eaten up with guilt, shame, and remorse. So I mean, this is just kind of a thing where we've got to eventually try to, if we can lower these things, if I can lower my selfishness, then I'm going to spend the time with that little old lady and not care about it. Then when that gal over there, gets the deal that I missed, I'm going to say, well, she got a family, she needs it, I'm happy for her, rather than saying, damn it, I wish that was mine, damn it, right? So we can get rid of a little bit less selfish, a little bit less dishonest, a little bit like these, and then our resentments are going to automatically go down. Well, we can't do that. Self can't overcome self. We're going to have God's help, and that's coming up in step 6 and 7. So I cannot do anything about any other human being on earth, but I can do something about my relationship with God, right? And keeping my instincts under control, right? I don't have to be so greedy where I need every deal that walks in there, right? If I can keep my instincts under control, I don't have to get so angry. If I don't have to get angry, I'm in much less chance of drinking than I am if I just continue to get angry over and over and over. So in column 1, right, we learn how resentful we really are and how that resentment blocks us off from the sunlight of the Spirit. Because if I'm lying in bed in the middle of the night thinking about how I'm going to get even with this son of a bitch, God's not going to get through that stuff. In column 2, what did they do? We discover that it's not the people we're mad at or resentful at. It's what they've done to us that we get angry. So it's this right here, the cause. This could be anybody over here, and if they do it, I'm gonna have resentment, right? Now in column 3, we discover it's not even what they did to us, but it's how we choose to react to it based on our relationship with God and whether our basic instincts are out of control. Let me see if I can find it here. I think I got something. I got something marked in the 12 and 12 here. Let's see. Well, first of all, I want to say that you're talking about the 4th step. Bill says, without a willing and persistent effort to do this, he's talking about the 4th step, about the moral inventory, there can be little sobriety or contentment. So even if we go to a lot of meetings and we stay off the sauce, if we're anxious and worried and depressed, we're probably going to drink again, right? Without a searching and fearless moral inventory, most of us have found that the faith which really works in daily living is out of reach. Out of reach. When the satisfaction of our instincts for sex, security, and society, right? Because I don't want to lose face, becomes the sole object of our lives, then pride steps in to justify our excesses, right? So we're, these things over here, we're going to be able to justify to ourselves, right, that we can do it. When I didn't have a God in my life, the only thing I had was prestige, money, and sex. That's it. That's all I had. And I had to keep shoving that in the big hole in my chest to try to maintain myself. The most common symptoms of emotional insecurity, fear that we're not going to get what we need, are worry, anger, self-pity, and depression. We're causing them. We're causing them on ourselves. Let's see, I think I had one other thing. And again, I read this last week. It talks about doing steps 4 and 5. It says some people are unable to stay sober at all when we don't do this. Others will relapse periodically until they really clean house. And even old-timers sober for years often pay dearly for skimping on this step. Right? They would tell how they tried to carry the load alone, how much they suffered of irritability, anxiety, remorse, and depression, and how unconsciously seeking relief they would sometimes accuse even their best friends of the very character defects they themselves are trying to conceal. And I talked last week about people who are sober with all the trappings of a good life that end up taking their lives, right? They end up taking their lives because they're still living only on these basic instincts, and they're looking for outside things to take care of an inside problem. That doesn't work with us. Let's see here. So, for resentments again, we replay what the cop did 5 years ago. Replay what Uncle Billy did 10 years ago. Replay in my head what my mom did 15 years ago, what my dad did 20 years ago. Some of these people are dead and they're long gone. And they are controlling my thinking, right? Because I'm thinking of what they did to me and I'm blaming them. If they control my thinking, they control my life. So again, column 4, we look at what we did to get the ball rolling and what the exact nature of our wrong was. The resentment was the wrong. And the exact nature of my wrongs, mistakes, are my selfishness, self-seeking, dishonest, fear, and inconsideration. So when I hear a 5th step, I don't care that the guy committed adultery 42 times. I don't care about that. I don't care that he stole 336 times. I don't care that he lied 10,522 times. I don't care about that. What we're going to talk about, what in him caused him to do this in the first place. Right? And it's these character defects, because from those stem all other character defects that we can have. So that's what we talk about in step 5. These are the defects I got to become willing to let loose in 6. The shortcomings I'm going to ask God to remove in 7. I got the names for my list in 8. And then I make the amends in 9. So if we don't do this, we can't go forward in the steps. And again, justified resentments, they block us off from God just as much as unjustified resentments. So are we justified in having these justified resentments? Sure we are. If we want to get drunk, let's keep them. Because it controls your thinking, it controls your decision, your life, and you give these resentments the power to actually kill you, right? So here I am saying, if they hadn't done that to me, I wouldn't have to be the way I am today. That's victimization, and there is no place for victimization in AA. We're all adults, and what happened in the past does not need to control what we do today. And if we've got a resentment in our head today, no matter what the person did, it's not true. It is not true. It might be based on truth. It might be partially true, right? But when we play resentments over and over in our head, we change them, right? What they did gets worse, what we did gets less, and the harm that's done us gets deeper. And we play it over and over again, and pretty soon we never did anything. We're white as the driven snow, and it was all their damn fault, right? It's kind of like instant replay on a football game, right? You know, the receiver goes up, he catches it, and he gets hit, and the announcer replays it in slow motion over and over. And you can see the guy, it looks so much worse. And we do that to ourselves, right? So we got to remember that people that do things to us are perhaps not bad people, but they're sick people. That's what the book tells us. They're sick, just like us. So we got to consider this. If we consider it, maybe we can straighten out some relationships while people are still alive. Now, people that have harmed us, we're not gonna grab them by the hand and skip down the path of life, right? And we don't even approve of what we did, right? But if we can, we got to get rid of the resentment that controls us, and maybe we can mend some of these relationships. Well, once people are dead, we can't mend the relationships. You know, both of my parents, they're too late. They're dead, right? So we got to try to clean this up while people are still alive. So again, by the way, I read this book by Tony Hillerman, and he's a Navajo, and the Navajo people, they say that resentments will kill you. They're not even, well, some are alcoholics, but they say resentments will kill you, and they actually have a spiritual healing ceremony to get rid of resentments. That's how bad they think they are. They think people that are full of resentment, not even alcoholics, are very, very sick. And they have ceremonies to get rid of these things, right? And again, they can be real or imagined. So, quick review. When we do the resentment part, we see how many resentments we have. And resentments, we can only see one at a time. That's why we got to list them. We saw how many we have. We see how they block us off from God. We see it's not the people that we're mad at, but what they did to us that we resent. Then we see it's not even what they did to us, but how we react to what they've done to us, a threat against our basic instincts. We see most resentments are a waste of time. They paralyze us from doing worthwhile stuff. Most of them never did us any good. They never straightened out any relationships. They never made us any money. Resentments never make us feel better, only worse. They block us off from God. We don't feel good. We become insane. And we start to think about the ease and comfort that comes with taking a drink. And we end up drunk all over again. Right? We saw how people have controlled and dominated us through our lives through these resentments. I used to think I was a big, strong guy. Nobody controls me. Well, these resentments were running my life. When we do the inventory this way, we see how stupid most of these resentments are, and 95% of them, I guarantee you, they're going to disappear automatically. The other 5% we're going to get rid of through prayer. If you need to, therapy, and work with your sponsor. Sometimes we got to go to therapy and get a professional involved, and that's okay. Right? We're not going to, it says that we got to respect doctors and ministers and other things. And that the amazing thing is that God replaces these resentments with the opposite. Serenity, peace of mind, happiness, compassion, love, and goodwill to man. These things were all foreign to me. I didn't know what the hell they were until I went through this process. Now, not all resentments are bad. And I'm going to get to fears yet today too. Not all resentments are bad, because God never gave us anything that's bad. So let's look at a good resentment. Let's say that I'm standing around the tile shop where I work, and I'm going, man, it's slow. Nobody's buying. I'm wasting my time here. This is awful. This is horrible. And all of a sudden, I see a guy down at the end. And that guy is going through his leads from 6 months ago, a year ago. He's doing all these follow-up calls, right? So he's doing something with his time. This guy then starts sending out thank you notes to all the customers that bought from him. Then he goes and he straightens his section in the store. And I'm going, look at that son of a bitch. What's he doing over there? Right? So if I see him doing that, and I say, well, I better call my leads. I better straighten my section. I better send out my thank you cards. That's an example of using a resentment for the right purpose, right? For the right, because the store's looking better, and I'm doing follow-up, I'm getting sales, and I'm establishing better relations with customers. So even though I got mad at this guy for doing it, because he made me look bad by doing that, I did it, and things worked out good, right? All right. We do this, we're in much less chance of getting drunk, and the big part, we see what we did to get these things in motion, and we see the character defects that we are going to need to talk about in 5, let loose in 6 and 7, and fix in 8 and 9. Fears, right? People say, hey man, I don't have any fears. I'm not afraid of anything. Okay? Well, okay, I say, how about, are you afraid of a black widow spider? Well, yeah. Would you be afraid of a big guy with a gun? Yeah. How about an angry barking dog? Yeah, I'd be afraid of that too. Okay, how about, are you afraid of embarrassment? Well, I guess I am. Are you afraid that people might think badly about you? Well, yeah, I guess I am. Are you afraid of dying alone? Yeah, I guess I am. How about cancer? You afraid of, sicknesses? Yeah. You afraid nobody might love you? You afraid that you might get sick one day and nobody's going to take care of you and you're going to die by yourself? Are you afraid that maybe God is not going to help you because He knows who you are? Are you afraid of success and the responsibilities that go with that success? Are you afraid of failure? Are you afraid of stuff from the past catching up with you? Are you afraid of people from the past catching up with you? Are you afraid of intimacy? I mean, I could say all of these things I was afraid of. We've got fears of our marriages, our children, our jobs, IRS, police, feds, the church. And fears can control and dominate us just as much as resentments can. And when fears are in our head all day long, those are blocking us off from God too, and God can't get in. And just like resentments, we can only see one fear at a time. So we're going to go back to the book now. We're going to read just our little bit on fears. So we are on page 67. 67. Okay. Now we should have a line under these matters straight. It says end of resentments, and then under it is the start of fear. So we just got a little bit to read. I'm going to run a couple of fear columns and we'll be done. Notice that the word fear, underline the word fear, is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. Okay, so we're going to highlight to the end of the page. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Okay, so at the bottom of the page we're going to write ask sponsee. And of course, whenever we see that, we're also going to ask ourselves, how much does fear play a role in your life? How much does fear play a role in your